Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting / open discussion. Today is July 6th, 2021. Please add yourself to the attendee list. I have not added myself to the attendee list, and I will do that. Let's go through some status updates and then dive into discussion topics. First off, we have Bridget.
Hi, everyone. So last week I was on PTO, so doing a little bit of catch up after that week. This week, a lot of my focus is going to be on trying to catch up on some of the issue backlog and community support requests that we've had coming in with the transition and changes on the team. That is something that we haven't been giving as much attention to. So that is something I'm going to try and rectify this week. I need to put in another bullet point here. I'll type after I'm finished talking, but I have some changes to the plugin design doc, changes that were requested from Fong and Scott, which I need to push. So I will do that as well. Apologies. Lots of different things going on in different directions. So apologies for keeping folks waiting on that. And that's me.
Thank you, Bridget, for catching up on support. Really appreciate it. Any questions, comments for Bridget? All right, next up, Dave.
Hey, this week, same as last week. Do some work on pulling together the 1.7 roadmap with Eleanor and the rest of the management team. She's going to go through that. Upload progress still going along. I did do some more POC work, try and get some demos in here. I've got Astrolabe moving data directly from an EBS disk to a vSphere disk, so that's kind of fun. So work on getting the videos and the explanations of that together for everybody.
Nice. Any questions, comments for Dave? All right. And Scott, if you want to add any updates here, please do so as well.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot. I've been doing some PR review, but that's pretty much it for the last week or so.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's dive into discussion topics. The first one we have is the revised 1.7 roadmap. Eleanor.
Yes. So do you mind if I share my screen, or do you want me to? Oh, perfect.
Go for it.
So can everyone see my screen with this roadmap on it?
Yep.
Okay,
zoom
great. Can I zoom in, you said?
Yeah.
Yes. Is that better?
Thank you.
Great. So in short, as I think folks know, we've had some maintainers move to other teams, and we are starting to have some folks join our Velero team and ramp up. Because of that, we've had to reconsider what we deliver for 1.7. And it did give us a chance to actually focus on some things that maybe we should have focused on anyways more. So we've decided that we think so first of all, we are saying that 1.7 will ideally be delivered early fall. We'll be a little clearer on a date as we get closer to that. We really think that the #1 priority should be improve Valero's technical health. And that's a very wide topic. And so really we see it zooming into 3 things. One is to streamline the release process. Right now, my understanding is it takes the engineers quite a while to release, and that's time taken away from community support and feature work. So let's streamline it using automated processes. Likewise, the end-to-end tests are, of course, automated, but the running of them, my understanding, is not automated. So our goal is to automate the running of the end-to-end tests on at least one cloud, probably AWS or vSphere. Eventually, we will cover other clouds, but from what I hear, running between clouds is not where we see most of the bugs. It's usually we just want to run them regularly. And then once we get that to happen, it sounds like possibly not for 1.7, but we will work on figuring out when we run them, either once a day or as part of the release pipeline, or before or after PR, or something like that. But first, we just want them to run in an automated fashion. And lastly, there's a lot of pre-release manual tests that are currently done, and obviously those are ideal candidates to turn into automated end-to-end tests. All of this will save our developers so much time so they can do more good work elsewhere. And of course, hopefully we'll be more likely to catch bugs and deliver better features. So that's why this is our #1 priority. And then, so for the other things that we still hope to deliver in 1.7, this should be very familiar. This is what Bridget's working on. So that'll continue. This upload progress, sorry, plugin versioning, upload progress monitoring, also what Dave has been working on. So that's going to continue like normal. We, for a while, have wanted to do Ipv6 testing. This is also in the original roadmap. We just want to make sure, we think that going to Ipv6 should be no problem at all for Velero. More and more clusters are moving to Ipv6. So we just want to test and make sure that that works fine. And if there are issues, boy, do we want to know about them now rather than later. And note, this is specifically not going to be a dual stack mode. It won't be IPv4 and IPv6. It'll just be for IPv6. Velero Debug was something that Nolan was working on. And so our new team members based in Beijing are going to start working on that. And distro lists is also going to be here as well. And Carvel installation, we're very lucky that Carlicia, even though she has moved to a different team, is still going to actually be doing that work. So we're very grateful that she's doing that. Plugin timeouts. This is really Fong, you can maybe update us. We just wanted to note that, of course, from what I understand, the plugin versioning needs to be merged in first, and Bridget is having more and more things pulling on her time, so it's slowing her down how much, or it's reducing the time she can put into plugin versioning. Maybe this note is even irrelevant now, so Fong or Bridget, you can update after, but we're just calling that out. And then from that original 1.6 roadmap, we had hoped to do CSI snapshots, bringing that to GA. We've decided to let that slip for the simple reason that the next few versions of Kubernetes will still support entry drivers. And so if someone wants, basically you can use other plugins rather than the CSI plugin to do the same thing. Obviously, we will not let this slip too long, or else then we'll have major problems. But this will, I hope, be in 1.8. Multiple cluster support is something that we very much want to do. We are letting it slip because it feels less urgent than the other tasks listed, but I think there's a very good chance that'll get into 1.8. And this manifest for backup and restore, which is foundational work for so much else we want to do, we very much hope that'll be in 1.8 so that we can do the other good things. So let me pause here. Are there questions, comments, clarifications?
I just had a quick question. I noticed that the V1 Beta 1 CRD issue is not mentioned here. I know this was mentioned last week on the call. The hope was to get that dealt with prior to 1.7. I wasn't sure where that fit into this, whether that was going to be a 1.6Z release or where that fit in.
I think it'll be a 1.6.3. Is that, Bridget, what we agreed on?
Yeah, I think so. So we realized that 1.7 would come after the 1.22 Kubernetes release, so that we need to have a patch release for the 1.6 series in place before that. So I think that's our current plan.
Okay. Thanks.
And by the way, to clarify, of course, we have 1.6.1 out, which fixes that bug that we had. 1.6.2, we suspect, there's just a few things that we want to, there's a few fixes we might want to do in 1.6.2. That should come out pretty soon, we are hoping. And then 1.6.3 will be the what you just discussed. So.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or clarifications?
Well, I can talk about a little bit about the plugin when we talk about it in the next topic. So.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and this is just, I just didn't, wasn't sure, so we left it as vague in case anyone was specifically depending on it. Great. Any other comments before I unshare? Okay, so I assume we'll probably wait a day or two just to get any last.
Just
yes.
one question. So for 1.7, do we have like a rough target date?
We're going to say early fall for now. The reason simply being is that as we ramp up our new team members, it's pulling time away from Dave and Bridget. So that affects these two. Plus our new team members are going to be working on these three plus this. So we're hoping in about a month, as they ramp up more, it'll be a lot easier to put a date on. But anyone who's curious, if anyone is really depending on 1.7, feel free to ping me and I can try to give you an updated estimate. So my plan is to wait a day or two. If we don't get any other feedback, then I will commit this as, or someone, maybe Jonas will help me, commit this as the new roadmap, and it'll replace the current one on our repo.
Why don't we just go ahead and put that in as a pull review right away, and that'll let other people have a chance to comment if they didn't catch the meeting or the whatever.
That is a good process. I wasn't here when you did the last roadmap, so that makes sense. I'll do that. Thanks. And did I have, oh, right. And I had another question. Is now a good time to go into my 30-day question? Okay, sure. So I think I was talking to, I don't know where it came up, but I was having conversations with Bridget and Dave. And one thing that emerged was, I think Dave at least said he was quite shocked that, so Velero has the default backup storage time. I don't know if there's a more specific term in the industry. No? Okay. The time that we keep a backup before we delete it is set to 30 days by default. My understanding is users can change that. Dave told me, Dave, who's been in the industry for a while, said that when he discovered that, it shocked him that his backups suddenly were deleted when he came back a month later. So I guess I just wanted to see whether, is this something that we should consider changing? Has anyone felt pain around this? Is this like so irrelevant compared to the other bigger kind of bugs we're seeing?
Yeah, I think this is something we need to really get the user community feedback on. It just, to me, it was like principle of least surprise. It's like, I don't expect my backup utility to automatically delete things after 30 days by default.
And we don't want to surprise people, especially in disaster recovery.
Yeah, that does feel odd.
Had you not noticed it either?
I actually had noticed it. And again, up until recently, our main use case was for migration. And so that really wasn't relevant because we tend to use them immediately. But now that we're doing more on the backup and restore side, that was something that we really hadn't talked about it, but it was, I mean, I was aware of it because I'd seen it. I'm wondering whether we might, in addition to maybe lengthening that, think about some way of making a more flexible way of keeping a certain number of backups, but then, backups of what? Because, you have different backups that aren't equivalent. And is there some way of identifying this group of backups where one supersedes the previous one and you want to keep a certain number around, but that kind of thing. I'm not really sure, but so it's good, something worth considering, a kind of a more flexible scheme around that. But in the absence of that, even just increasing that default might make some sense.
And I guess the question is, would we break anything too terribly if we just set it to say 365, so we give people a year for the backups, say? Is that a change that we can go put in very quickly and then people are fine, or are we going to maybe break things? Looks like Jonas has a thought.
I'm just wondering, Ed, does this affect RESTIC backups as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the time to live on the backup. And so Velero automatically every now and then wakes up and says, hey, how old is this backup? What's the time to live? Oh, it's 0. This backup is done. And it deletes and cleans everything out.
Yeah,
So
including snapshots and things like that.
Yep.
We do RESTIC, what is it, forget and prune?
I don't know exactly what it does. I mean, it's doing whatever it does when we delete a backup. So it's the same process. So hopefully that's all correct. If it's not correct, it needs to get fixed. But
yeah, and with snapshots in particular, depending on the plugin, some of the those tend to be incremental. So do we have issues where if you delete an old backup and an old snapshot, that incremental thing comes into where you don't have a complete snapshot, or does the underlying storage handle that properly?
the expectation is the underlying storage handles that. I know that was one of the issues we looked at when we did the vSphere plugin. If it can't handle deleting an incremental in the middle, I consider the plugin or the storage system to be broken.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm glad you asked that question though, because thank you. I was wondering, I didn't know the answer.
It needs to handle that case because it's not just the scheduling. The user could just as easily delete any backup at any time. And so any incrementals need to be handled appropriately.
So for next step, oh, sorry, I don't want to cut off the discussion. Any other thoughts?
Just a question, and this is definitely showing me not knowing how things work. When we do backups here, do we do differential or incremental backups?
It depends. So the Kubernetes resources themselves, it's always a full backup.
Full. Okay.
The restic, if you're using restic is essentially an incremental. The plugins, it depends on what's underneath of it. So for example, like on vSphere right now, we always do a full backup. EBS automatically does incrementals. Azure, I think you have to set incrementals someplace to get that.
Yeah, I think a recent Azure updated moved to supporting incrementals. The first Azure plugin version was full backups. I think we now do incremental there.
Yeah, and it's just a flag you set for the Azure storage system, really. There's not a big difference in the plugin. What do you think of this?
No, I'm just wondering then if we do incremental backups consistently, and then after 30 days we delete the full backup, then we don't have anything.
So it's a good point, but if the storage systems are designed properly, they won't make the incremental snapshots go bad. Like restic should do this, like if you delete the basic thing, it has a whole structure inside. And that's one of the reasons why the vSphere plugin does fulls every time, is because we didn't want to build out that structure.
Yeah.
So we rely on those. I mean, honestly, we can double check that, and we probably should, but that the scheduled deletion versus the user deletion, it goes to the same path, and the user may delete any backup at any time. So if we wind up with bad backups, that's like a huge bug. Wouldn't surprise me, but it'd be a huge bug.
So if we just have a 30-day retention period right now, and if we're looking at doing something else as default, would it be like one full monthly and keep that for a year or something like that? Or
I think those are really good options. So it's like, having a more not even flexible, more configurable thing, where, for example, like in a schedule, you could say, hey, apply this retention policy where monthlies get kept for a year, weeklies get kept for a month, dailies. These are all like our classic backup scenarios. Yeah. So that'd be kind of cool. I think what we're just asking right now is this 30-day removal. It kind of makes sense depending on where you're thinking about your Kubernetes data from. Because I think a lot of people are thinking about this as just, hey, I just want to be able to get back to a working system almost where I was at as quickly as possible. In that case, like the 30-day retention interval makes some sense. But as we move on, and it's like the data is becoming more important or whatnot, and it's just like, I don't know, it's kind of like just an expectation that the backup system is keeping things longer, at least automatically. I've been bitten by this in the past in other systems, not systems, but admins keeping a schedule, a turnover schedule that was too short, and the results were not fun, and nobody was happy afterwards.
Well, and actually, what might play into this is oh yes.
I mean, I'm used to implementing tape backups and just keeping them forever, essentially. So, yeah, I was a little surprised that we keep them just for 30 days.
Well, I'm hearing that tentatively, well, actually, what I was going to say, by the way, about what Dave's making a point also, another TKG PM another Tanzu PM who I work with, who handles security and compliance, actually had some questions about Velero. So I think Dave and I are going to meet with him just to understand what enterprises might expect from a compliance point of view. So we may learn that there are certain features, maybe something like that, tweaks that we can make to Velero that will make users more comfortable using Velero. So. I think next step, maybe I'll create an issue just around this, just enough kind of to explain this thought process we're going through. And Alay, by the way, I like your point that maybe we have no default, and maybe the flag every time you want to run a backup, maybe a required flag is you have to set the time, or no, not setting it at all. I don't know how easy that is from an engineering perspective. All that's to say is I'll create the issue, and then maybe I'll post it on the Slack channels and see if anyone wants to give feedback. Is that a good next step? Great. Doesn't seem like it's super urgent, but it just, I don't know. I really hate the idea of really shocking people by doing. I guess that's the point, is destructive actions can have big implications. So yeah.
Yeah, and I found, after I hit this, I'm like, God, why are we doing this? This is a bug. And I read, and like on the first or second page of the docs, it's right there by default, 30 days. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I didn't read the docs.
Yeah, but for such a destructive action, I don't want someone to rely on reading the docs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't notice it from the docs. I just noticed that when you do a list of backups, it's, one of the columns shown is, how much longer it's going to be around. But you have to think about, okay, that means it's going to be deleted after, 25 days or whatever. And I guess the question was asked, what's the downside to just, as a first step, just making it 365 days? I think the only downside to that is some people might run out of storage in their bucket. But if someone's hitting storage issues, then they can set it to something lower, explicitly, or clean it up manually or something like that. That's kind of on the user, because now they're running out of storage. Maybe we need to think about how, I don't know, if some kind of monitoring or noticing of, I don't know if that makes sense, or that's kind of on the user to deal with that. But, okay, you're back, the bucket you're using is almost full because you're keeping all these backups, which could be fine, but, But
that
again,
would be kind of a interesting feature would be like max storage or something for backups. And you could set like an alarm or something, or an alert.
Mm-hmm.
Probably better not to have the system start automatically deleting things. But yeah, being able to monitor it would be cool.
Yeah, but I like the point. Yeah, I'd prefer that. Yeah, we can. It's very possible that the first change will be just set it to 365 instead of 60 or whatever we decide. But I'll put some options in the issue, and then we can have some conversation there. So
we're not hearing anybody going, well, of course you need to delete backups after 30 days.
Yes, that is very true. Okay, in the interest of keeping the meeting running, I'm going to take my action items, and I will done with this issue.
Thank you, Eleanor. Next up, we got Fong.
Oh, and do you want to reshare your screen, Janice? It's up to you.
Yeah, sure. Unless you want to share something, Fong.
No, nothing to share on the screen. I just want to give some update and some questions. So number one is the update for the plugin versioning implementation. As the design for the plugin versioning is close to the end, I start to start the implementation in parallel so that we can have a little bit halfway there. I have started to implement, and I found that the design might be. I found that it changed so many code in many different places, a little bit more than I originally expected. So I might have to have a conversation with with Bridget to see that if there's any way we can refactor code a little bit, so that in the future, if we need to add more version in, if we add change more when we change the version plugin, we don't have to change the code that much. So that there's a lot of place where we reference to a version. I mean the plugin interface. All of these have to be switching to version 2, and then when we have like version 3, we have to do that same change again to version 3, and so on and so forth. So that caused a lot of change that I wonder if that is a necessary change. So that is something that I would like to maybe discuss with Dave and Bridget and other people maybe later. But that is current right now. I'm just trying to do the implementation just to rough out the design to see if I can see additional work need to be added into the design. Another thing that I want to talk about when I'm implementing that versioning is because I think I mentioned this in our design meeting, which is that I would like to have like a unit test, or at least like a test setup ready, so that when we are ready to, have all the change ready, I want to run through this, unit test, this system test, integration test, the whole setup to guarantee that the change will not, cause any regression to the existing plugin that, currently we have out there. I don't have all the resources to test all of these plugins. So I wonder if in our community we have any resources or any test suite that already available for me to take to use to do for that purpose.
Well, I think like we can definitely help out with the testing, as Eleanor pointed out in our roadmap, getting our end-to-end tests running on at least one cloud, and building out the end-to-end test suite that we have, I think will help with that. But whether that happens at the point whenever you want to do this testing, I don't know if it'll be ready then. But if you have like something that you want to test it on a specific cloud with a specific plugin version, I can help out with that. But I don't know if other folks have other infrastructure that's available for testing.
In that case, I will contact with you on Slack to continue on that when I feel like I have something ready to test. Very like right now, I already create a private branch for it, and I will share with you when I get to a certain point.
Yeah.
And I will, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think as well your comments about so much code needing to be changed, I think that was something that I was like, I think we were aware of whenever doing the design, because the implementations for all of the gRPC handling happens in so many places, and a lot of it is duplicated. And I don't think there is a way, well, at least whenever I was doing the initial investigation work, I couldn't at that time think of a way to make that near. But perhaps as we start to implement these new versions, maybe someone else might be able to spot something and handle it in a better way than I have.
What I saw was that we might to avoid changing all of that, we might have to refactor the code, and that might not be like easy task to do to be honest. So I would right now we just go with the design and let me see how much code that we need to change, and at that point we can come up with some kind of a design to refactor the code. So that the next time we roll in a version, plugin version, we don't have to change that much. So that is something that I hope we can achieve over this exercise of implementing this plugin versioning. Okay.
Yeah, and I think one of your main concerns has been the vSphere plugin, right, Phong?
Yes.
So we really need to reach out to them and make sure that they're involved in this, because I think this is, given the current architecture of the vSphere plugin, this needs to go all the way through their stack as well.
Yeah, yeah. So that is coming. That's also touching the topic that we've mentioned earlier. That is the timeout, the plugin timeout problem that I tried to solve. So and we mentioned that it was about to schedule for release Velero 1.7. So my comment on that one is that I have to implement this. We have to implement this versioning first. After we have this versioning, we would able to add the context into the plugin interface. At that point, if we feel ready, then we would add the timeout, because the version, the Velero timeout will use that versioning plugin. That will use that new interface. So I cannot say much about Velero plugin timeout until this versioning implemented and then get in. So whether or not it's going to make it into 1.7, I think my call right now it would be very likely that it will slip until we have it. Until this one's coming, merging. Okay, so that is my number one topic. Number two topic that I have is currently we run into this bug that when we have a project class included in our cluster, it's in one cluster, but it's not in the other cluster. So when we back up and we restore to the other cluster, it fails, because it doesn't have the same priority class on the target cluster. So even from what I understand, when we enable the include cluster resource for a namespace, then the backup will backup all of the cluster resource being used by this namespace. It seems like it have a bug in that area, that when we back up the namespace, we did not back up the priority class. I searched on the GitHub issues list, and I do not see anyone mention anything about that, except for one bug that is mentioned something about a pod that is failed to restore when priority being specified. I found that one and it got closed, so I have to double check whether that is the same problem that I have or not, and I will create a new bug to track this issue. But I just want to bring it out here in case anyone in the community have heard about that or know about that or aware of that problem. Nope. Okay.
Yeah, I just did a quick search through the source code, and I don't see us doing anything special for priority class. So it's not like I don't think it's, automatically not backed up. So I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, just remember with the include with cluster resources, there's actually 3 values for it. It can be true, or it can be false, or it can be not set. And there's different behavior for all 3 cases. So when it's true, I think we're supposed to be including everything, whether or not it's relevant to the namespace. And then if it's the case where things sometimes get included or not is when it's not set, and that's where only specified cluster resources that we know about, or you have a plugin that knows about, we'll pull those in. So I'm not sure in this case whether it was unset, which is the default, or whether it was set to true. But the behavior will be different with those.
I think we in our test case support, we set it to no, so include cluster resource being set to no. And,
yeah. Okay. So if it's null, what that means is that Velero pulls in certain resources that it knows about, and so some of them are handled by Velero internally, and that's going to be things like PVs and CRD definitions and that kind of thing. And then you can write a plugin that will pull in things if you know that, for example, if you have a case where, in this case, the priority class is needed by pods, you need a plugin that pulled it in, because if it sets a null, then it's going to be only resources that Velero knows relate to those namespaces. And if it's we need code that specifies, hey, for this resource type that's cluster scoped, here's how we know it's relevant. Otherwise, Velero can't just predict any cluster scope resource that might be related to this namespace, because it's going to have to know that connection. And usually that's going to be via a plugin, unless it's something that makes sense for Velero core to deal with.
I see. So we have to write like a plugin that somehow know the relationship between the namespace that we want to and whatever the resource that I need to pull in, right?
Right.
Okay.
So in your case, it sounds like if you have a pod that specifically references a priority class, you might need a plugin that responded to pods. So the applies to returns pods. And then for each pod, it locates, because it's not just all priority classes, it's the specific priority class that relates to that pod, probably, I think, although I don't know that particular type. And so you could have a plugin that said, okay, for this pod, we look up priority class based on something in the spec, and then we add that, because one of the things the plugin can do is return additional items on a backup plugin to say also include these things. And so when include cluster resources is set to false, that means none are going to be included, even if a pod says include them. But if it's set to null, then if that pod plugin references to the priority class, and if this is something that's generally applicable, not just for your use case, it might make sense for this plugin to be in Velero. That's, I guess, a different question. If it's something that anyone that uses this, but if this is specific to your use case, then you'd have a plugin that just you installed in your Velero instance. But I mean, some of these things that are implemented as plugins still could be in core Velero if they make sense for all Velero users. But I know we've done this on the kind of OADP Red Hat side, where we might have certain things related to OpenShift, for example, where we want to pull in a certain cluster scope resource that's an OpenShift specific resource that relates to our pods or our service accounts, and we've written a plugin that would do that.
That sounds good, actually. Let me do some more research on that one to see if we can like add a plugin.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
That's it for my topics.
Awesome. Thank you, Fong. All right. Next up, we got Dylan, end-to-end testing.
Hey, so I just want to provide a brief update, and I don't want to rehash the same conversation we had last time, but we, in the past week, we have Jay on the call. He was looking into basically using that install Velero flag that was brought up last call for our use case. We found a bug, so we submitted a PR to expose that option back to the makefile, and also fix one of the tests that wasn't using that flag. So we submitted a PR up, and then I left a comment on Carlisia's open PR, and I'm just a little concerned that we need to address that PR before we kind of can go all in on adding more tests, because she significantly refactored a lot of the end-to-end testing package. If we merge, and obviously it sounds like she doesn't have any bandwidth to update that PR, which makes a lot of sense. So I just kind of wanted to raise it as a point that we probably need to do something with that before we can like really start changing the end-to-end tests. That PR does break the install Velero flag, so it kind of makes the PR we posted null if that does get merged. I know that last week we mentioned that we wouldn't want to merge that PR as is if it removed that flag, but she doesn't have the bandwidth to add it back in. So we're obviously happy to refactor it and add it back in if we decide that the best approach is to take the improvements that she made and get it merged in. But I don't know if it's possible that we can merge this to a feature branch, and then we work there as part of we update her changes to support this flag before it gets merged.
That's just sounding way too complicated. Let me get with her. We'll take over if necessary. We'll just take over the branch and make changes and push it in, because I mean it's not okay to say, hey, I'm giving you a pull request and no, I won't respond to changes that are being requested before it gets merged.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, and I think as by default, I know I've made changes to other maintainer branches before, so I think anyone who has write permissions to the repo should be able to push changes to those branches as well. So if needs be, like Dave mentioned, we can take over the branch and make the changes that are necessary before merging.
Okay, great. That sounds good. All right, thanks a lot.
All right. Any other discussion topics for today? All right. Let me share my screen and we'll go through some shout outs. Who wants to lead the shout outs today?
I can do it if no one else wants
Right.
to. Yeah, so this first one is a change from Wankai, who's one of our new team members based in Beijing. And this is enabling ET tests to be run as part of our PR GitHub action flow. So this is a huge step in automating our ET tests. So thank you very much, Wankai. This is a really great addition. So yes, hopefully now as well, whenever you look at any new PR on the Velero repo, you'll see additional actions in there, similar to how we check the CRDs on various versions of Kubernetes as well. Okay, yeah, so then this next one is from Kayo, who had, this was a feature that was added into 1.6 to, I believe, use the owner references from the schedule in the backup. I can't remember exactly the feature and how it works, but this is enabling it to be used within the Helm chart. So from what I can tell, it avoids some issues when using things like Argo CD. So yeah, thank you very much. And then I believe there was one more from Eleanor, and I'll give it a +1. So go ahead, Eleanor. I agree
Yeah,
with you.
I'll just say that I certainly monitor our 2 Slack channels of Velero users and Velero devs, and I try to answer the questions. Usually I can't. I'm increasing my own knowledge, but I've just noticed in the last few days, Jen Ting has been answering a number of questions, and it makes me so happy to hear that we've had this kind of staffing transition time. I think we've all had a little bit of a harder time addressing the community needs, and it's so great to see him doing that. And I apologize, I don't monitor the PR reviews, but I'm so happy to hear, Scott, maybe you said you were doing PR reviews or something. Thank you for leaning in. That's fantastic. So, and Jen Ting, I know you're not on the call. Hopefully you're sleeping, but I hope you will listen to this later. That's all for me.
And yeah, just a quick update as well. So now we're in July, so we'll switch things around with the community meetings. So next week we'll have our first community meeting in Asia Pacific meeting hours. So it will be late at night here in the US, early morning over in Beijing, in the Beijing time zone. So look forward to getting some email blasts around new calendar invites.
Thank you for organizing that.
So with that, thank you all for joining this week. Have a fantastic rest of the week, everyone. Chat soon.
Bye.